The Warcraft movie is almost upon us, and I've been getting a lot of requests to talk about the Warcraft movie and to give my impressions of it and what my thoughts are based on like the trailers and stuff that are out. And so I thought I'd do that. A little bit of a precursor. I'm going to reiterate that you can't judge an entire movie based on its trailer. You can just give sort of what your anticipated feelings sort of are. But before I talk about everything that's going on right now with the Warcraft movie, let me give you a little background. I've played every Warcraft game, including the very first one way back when I was, I think, in junior high. All the way up through World of Warcraft, which I played quite a bit, although I am not currently subbed to the game. I guess you would consider me a big Warcraft fan if you go by that, although I'm not really invested in the universe right now. So I have a somewhat, I have some ambivalence towards the current movie. On one hand, I'm not really invested in what the company is doing right now in the universe. On the other hand, I have this long history with it, so it's hard for me to say whether I'm excited or I just don't care. Right now, I'm leaning more towards I don't care. But anyway, let me tell you a story as well as background. I was talking to my brother-in-law a while back, and we were talking about the Warcraft movie, and he says, you know, I think I'm going to pass on this Warcraft movie. I'm like, why is that? Just out of curiosity. And he says, well, it looks like a big CGI bukkake fest. I'm like, of course it does. It's a CGI movie. And he goes, no, it's a live action movie. I'm like, what? And I went and looked at like the new trailer, and there were people. So I guess it's a live action movie and not a CGI movie. I thought it was a CGI movie because I didn't really do any reading on this movie. I heard stuff about it years ago about them trying to make a movie, and I'm just like, whatever. It's vaporware. It'll never get made. And then they made it, and all the stuff I saw up until very recently was just like orcs yelling at the camera. CGI'd cartoonish-looking orcs, like Duratan, just like yelling at the camera. So I actually thought it was a CGI'd movie until like more recently when it's like, no, there's these actors in it. Because I haven't engaged with this concept really at all. I say I'm ambivalent, but I probably just don't really care very much at all. So there's actors, and because of my past reaction to the orcs, I'm like, oh, I thought it was a cartoon movie, which means the orcs don't look realistic or convincing, which means when they sit next to actors that are real, it's probably not going to be very convincing. So there's a big problem with the movie right off the bat. So I'm inclined to agree with my brother-in-law initially and say I'm anticipating a movie that will not be that good looking. Now, let me talk about the current sort of state of where the movie's at. This is recorded on May 29th, 2016, and it hasn't come out in the United States yet, but there are reviews coming out, and they are not positive. So let's take a look at Metacritic. We could have a discussion some other time about whether Metacritic is a bunch of BS or it's something useful. But it does aggregate a lot of the reviews so you can see who sort of gave what score to what. They're giving it a Metascore of 37. And most of these are much better than 37. We have a lot of stuff around 40 and then a couple things below, all the way down to 10 on the wrap. So I like to look at really negative reviews and really positive reviews whenever I'm deciding about a product or deciding to buy like a CD or something like that. There are no really positive reviews, so I just looked at the really negative review. And this is over at The Wrap, and it's by Alfonso Duralde, and he gives a lot of reasoning behind his low score for this. He says that the CGI is not convincing, which I don't think it will be based on my past reaction that I just thought it was a cartoon. And that the acting's bad, that the story is kind of a bunch of nonsense, and he says the environments aren't convincing. He says he felt like everything was made to be so much like the video game, it doesn't really come off as a movie, which is always something that we're afraid of. So he gives a lot of good reasons for it. I'll probably link it down below and just link Metacritic where you can look at any reviews that you want. So it's not looking good, which makes me say, well, based on the information I'm getting, and something I should also say before I give my sort of conclusion and talk about the next thing. It's important, I've said this before with Star Wars, it's very important that when you have something that requires a bunch of external knowledge to know what's going on, that it really not be a movie. A movie needs to be pretty self-contained. You're shooting for a wide audience, a bunch of people who probably don't necessarily know all the background. So the idea that you have to read a book to know what's going on in the new Star Wars movie, I don't like that idea. I also don't like the idea that you have to have played Warcraft the way I have to enjoy the story. I might understand this story more than the reviewers understand it because I've played the games that contain these plot elements. But that doesn't mean that the movie makers get a pass because I already know the story. They have to convince other people who don't know the story, and I think there's a lot of people who've played World of Warcraft that don't know a lot of the background story of the first game and that sort of stuff. So that is something I will say. You gotta convince the audience, and you gotta really tell your story well. And it looks like the big complaint is that the story is cheesy and doesn't really make sense and isn't told that well. There's too much plot for the amount of space it's in, and it's very action-packed. So we don't really get a lot of time for, and there's no character development. That's another thing I'm seeing a lot of. But what this has kind of sparked, anyway, I guess my conclusion to this, that makes me think I'm not going to see it in theaters, right? And that's sort of like my razor, is that, is it going to be worth my time and effort to see it in theaters? And the answer is probably no. And a big reason that I don't see a lot of things in theaters right now is that I have a 10-month-old baby at home. And 10-month-olds are quite intense. And they also require babysitting when you're going to go do something, because you can't just like let them play Xbox while you go to the movies or something like that. You know, we're going to have to wait about 15 years for that. But when we are going to have to go through the trouble of getting babysitting and doing all that kind of stuff, and I like to go see movies with my wife, or if I'm going to go see a movie with my brother-in-law, like if we were going to go see Warcraft, I'd have to like just leave my, like, you take care of the baby tonight and I'll be off, which is not always a great way to invest in like a healthy family relationship, is just to be off every night while your wife takes care of everything at home. So if I'm going to take my wife to see something, it's going to be something that I think that she's going to like and enjoy. And if you are not going to understand the story to Warcraft, and she doesn't play World of Warcraft, then I'm not going to want to take her to that movie and have her not enjoy it and not get it and not be convinced by it. I'd rather go see like the new Captain America movie, even if I don't think it's going to be that good, because I think it's something that there's some sort of median there where we both might enjoy it. So that's kind of where I'm at. So a lot of people are like, what do you think of the new Batman movie? I'm like, I'm going to have to wait till video, because I can't really just like get out of the house whenever I want. It's the limitation of my life right now, and I'm okay with it, because what I get in return for not getting to go see movies in the theater all the time is all the awesome experiences of a family. So I'm getting the better end of the deal for sure. Anyway, this whole negative review thing has sparked a whole lot of repetition of this idea that like, don't listen to critics. And that sort of stuff. And I wanted to really talk about that in depth, because, of course, I've talked a lot on this channel about Star Wars, and I had a lot of views on my Force Awakens review, which was a negative review of it. And so I'm a critic, so I feel like critics' views can be valuable that way. But at the same time, I felt betrayed by critics with Force Awakens, because it got all these positive reviews, and then when I saw it and I didn't like it at all, I didn't enjoy it. So how do we sort of rectify these two sort of positions? And as I go through comments, this is on Gamnesia, who's talking a lot about it. This over and over and again, rule number 1, never listen to critics or reviews. I don't agree with that, but this is like a really constant sentiment that keeps coming up every time something gets a negative set of reviews that people are very invested in. So if a new game comes out that people are really invested in that series and it gets negative reviews, you're going to see a lot of people saying never listen to reviews. And of course, if the reviews agree with them, then they don't say anything, right? They don't say, don't listen to this reviewer who gave it a positive review that I agree with. You never have that position. But it is something when people are very invested in the Warcraft IP, and they want the movie to be good. They don't want to believe that it's bad. So they're going to say, like, ignore critics. Here's what I'm going to say about criticism and critics with this, is that A good criticism will tell you exactly why the critic arrived at the conclusions they arrived at. And I'm not going to say I'm the best critic in the world, but I really try to do this. I really try to give like a lot of info for how I arrived at my conclusion and all the little technical things. And I really think that this review over at The Wrap does a lot of that. Like, I think he really backs up his position on a lot of this stuff. You know, I think a good criticism, even if it's a negative review, will reveal to you whether you will like the movie or not. So a good critic, and maybe people don't like Roger Ebert for a bunch of reasons, but I like Roger Ebert as a critic, not because I agreed with his taste in movies. In fact, my taste in movies is probably pretty different from his, and I probably had a very different view of what makes a good movie and a convincing movie than he did. But he was so good about listing and talking about the things in the movie, talk about the content in the movie, that at the end of a review, I knew exactly whether I would like a movie even if he didn't. And I knew whether if he liked a movie, that would actually be a movie for me, because I got the right amount of information to make that decision. And I do think criticism, it's important to listen to criticism. And the reason is because we're consumers. And it's important as consumers that we spend our money wisely for ourselves, so that we are getting good value for our dollar, and so that we can save our money when appropriate. So it's important for us, and it's also important for the market, because the market needs good signals to produce the things that we actually want as consumers. You know, if you go to the supermarket every day or every week and you buy apples, and every week you buy them, you come home and there's worms in them, you need to stop buying those apples. Only that way will the supermarket realize that they shouldn't stock the apples, because people aren't willing to buy them. So then they stock something else besides those apples. They stock a different company's apples, or they stock pears instead. So if you have it on good authority that you are not going to enjoy something, if you have a critic that you know really represents your point of view, or you know a critic that is really good at explaining why they came to the conclusions that they came to, then you can be equipped as a consumer to decide, I'm not going to watch this movie. Because the only way that things get better is if some things fail. Those things that fail, you know that those were not the products that people wanted or found useful. That's why they didn't buy them. That allows companies to stop making that and make something different for the consumer. And so that's a very, very good thing. When you're dealing with a free market, you really want as much good consumer information out there as possible. So I do not agree with the sentiment, do not listen to reviewers. I say find reviewers that you think are giving you the correct information for you to make a good decision with your dollar, because your dollar is valuable to you. The 2 hours that you spend in a bad movie, you could be spending doing something else that's fun with the same money in the same time. And we all have limited time on this earth. We're not immortal. So we need to use our time really wisely. We need to use our money wisely. So yes, listen to those reviewers. Make your decision on it. I'm leaning towards passing on the Warcraft movie for the reasons that I gave. I have to, I can't really just like go see a movie on my own, at least without feeling like a jerk. I care about investing in my family, so I'm probably gonna see something else if I get a chance to like get out of the house this weekend. I'll probably go see something else, or next weekend I'll probably go see something else besides the Warcraft movie, and that's just the way it is. And it's as big as a fan as I might have been of Warcraft as a story. That doesn't mean that I need to go see the movie just because I liked something else that had the Warcraft name on it. I'm not going to be a fanboy. I'm not going to be a fan. I've told you guys not to be fanboys, and to view each product as a separate thing that has to convince you. The last thing I'll say on this, and this is just something general, if you notice, video game movies don't really come out very well. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that studios don't take video game stories seriously, but I think there's also too much of an attempt to follow a storyline that might work in a video game setting, but which might not work in a movie setting. If you're playing something like Witcher 3, which has like many, many hours of content, that's going to have a much more expansive story than what you can display in 2 hours on a movie screen. So you have to really cut it down. And a couple of things I've seen for Warcraft is really that they've tried to cram too much of a complicated story into a movie format. You have to deal with the limitations of your format. So that's one of the reasons I think a lot of video game movies work. And also, setups and settings that are compelling in a video game are not necessarily compelling on the big screen or in a book. And that's something that you have to keep in mind, that the medium affects a lot of the stuff that you're doing with the story and the setting. And the last thing I'll say is that Warcraft's strength is actually not in story. And this is especially true in World of Warcraft. Its strength is in lore. And the lore of World of Warcraft, it's good. It's not bad. Some people think it's bad. I think it's fairly decent. I think there's other lore that I find more interesting a little bit. I like EverQuest lore a lot. But it's the lore that's good, and there's a difference between lore and story. Lore is all the background that creates the world, and the story is like a set of events with characters. So here we have a story, but an attempt to form a story out of what is essentially lore. And one of the things that makes World of Warcraft compelling, or did make it compelling, is the fact that you have a lore-rich environment, but you're not forced into a story. The story is what you do. You're making the story, and this is also true in games like Elder Scrolls. The story of the game is not that important. The lore is really important, but it's something different. I don't have the books here to give you an example, but the Silmarillion, that's lore. Lord of the Rings, that's a story. And so when I see a story from Warcraft, I kind of think that it's probably not going to end up being that good because you're trying to take from too many different places to make a story happen. Anyway, that's what I think about that. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'm not, that's not too long-winded of you. Overall conclusion is that I'm getting a lot of information that makes me think with my limited time and resources, I'm going to pass on the movie. That doesn't mean you have to. You need to be a good informed consumer and make your own good decision. But I really do appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a great day.